This is Talking Mule Deer with your hosts Steve Belinda and Jody Stemler. Talking Mule Deer takes you on a journey to learn more about the Mule Deer Foundation, mule deer and black-tailed deer biology and management, tips and tactics for hunting, conservation issues, and even features some of our corporate and celebrity partners. Now, let's start talking mule deer.
Hey, you're Talking Mule Deer. I'm Steve Belinda, your host, and today we have with us the owner and president, Butch Whiting from Kryptek Outdoors, and also our dear friend, Dr. Mule Deer, Jim Heffelfinger from the Arizona Game and Fish. Welcome, gentlemen.
I'm uncomfortable with the doctor reference for sure.
That's sort of a joke, an ongoing joke between Jim and I. But, Butch, welcome back. You know, you joined us last year.
Thanks for having me back.
You know, I recently saw a picture of a buck you shot down in Mexico. Yeah. And what we really wanted to talk about today was that whole, what's the story behind? I know very little about hunting mule deer in Mexico. I see great bucks coming out of there every year. And just, you know, it sounded like there was a story and a quest behind this. So tell us, you know, what's going on here. You know, start wherever you want to start, but give us the download on it.
Well, first of all, the buck that you saw a picture of is phenomenal. He's just everything you imagine when you think about Mexico mule deer. So the quest that I have had is a long one, and I think total days all in, we're pushing 30 days to actually...
Of hunting days.
Of hunting days, not travel days. And
planning days, and thinking about it
No,
days.
it's like days in Mexico hunting mule deer. And it's hunting for me in Mexico. First of all, it was a aspirational quest, you know, to kill a giant Sonoran mule deer, free range. But also, it's probably one of the psychological toughest mental hunts that I've ever done.
Why is that?
Well, because you spend days and days and days just looking at cactuses and brush, and you're seeing deer every day. But the way that they hunt down there, and it's the only way I think that they can actually do it successfully, is from a high rack. So you're hunting on top of a truck that has a cage built around it.
I've seen those in Texas.
Right? They use them in Texas too, but this is free range, right? So you're out on a ranch that's hundreds of thousands of acres, and you're driving around and you're just looking at cactuses, and basically you're hunting this narrow band of maybe 100 yards on each side of the road. And I've gotten down and I've actually tried to hunt them like I would out west, right? And it's like hunting, I guess the analogy would be for the guys from Idaho and northern Nevada and Arizona, is like you enter into the thickest, nastiest juniper patch, and now you're in that juniper patch, and if you're going to get it done, you're going to be within 5 to 10 yards, right? Yeah. It's kind of like that, but in a macro type level. And so you'll go days and days, and it just starts to wear on you, like you're just staring at all this brush and, you know, cactus and so on. The terrain's also stupid difficult. Once you do get down, everything is, you know, like Arizona, trying to stick you, bite you, stab you, so on and so forth. But then you know, when you do, I mean, I saw several good bucks over this quest, but it's only a glimpse, right? Yeah. And so
is this multi-year?
Multi-year, 3 years.
3-year quest.
Yeah,
for a buck, hunting in a difficult situation in terrain that's nasty.
Yeah.
And then you have to make when you see these bucks, I imagine that you have to make a very quick decision whether it meets the caliber that you're looking for.
You do. And there's kind of I guess an unwritten rule is, like, if you're going to look at a buck, look at it through your rifle scope. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, that's always good advice. Yeah. You don't look and then decide.
Yeah,
try to get in all position and then you evaluate.
Right. So, and I saw some just tanks of bucks, but here they were for a second and gone over this quest, right? Yeah. And so you got this, like, you know, couple sightings to just keep you going. In the meantime, you're also seeing these bucks that do get harvested, and they're just traumatizingly huge, right? And so you've got this
they're there.
These images seared into your mind, and you never know you never know what's going to show up.
Yeah.
This specific ranch that I was hunting on, it's a working ranch, right? And so they, inside the ranch, have a 200-acre alfalfa field. And it's got does all over, and those does are pulling bucks from 20, 30 miles away.
Wow.
And so you never know what
They're
you're
roaming
gonna see.
So, Jim, is that normal?
Yeah,
Bucks going that far?
They roam and they look for doe groups, and they look for does that are close to estrus, and you've got a low density deer population in thick cover, and so they're, where you saw a deer once, he may not be there next week, and you get new deer coming in all the time.
Yeah, nobody had seen that big 202-inch deer that I killed, mainframe 4x4. No one had ever seen it before.
Wow.
So
the first year, let's go back to year one. You decide to go to Mexico. You put a standard on yourself. I'm going after an animal of this caliber.
That's right.
You go out. Did you see any of that first year? Did you have dreams between year one and year two?
I saw one on the ground that somebody else had harvested. Year two, same thing. Saw a couple that were just traumatizing. I saw a buck that was 36 inches wide and scored 231 points.
Wow.
And I literally fondled that set of horns for hours, right? So, I never actually had an opportunity where I was going to pull the trigger up until this deer that I was able to harvest. And once I found this buck, here's the rest of the story on this. All we saw was a couple inches of its back right forks, and we didn't even know if it was a shooter. And it was bedded down, and I literally sat on the gun for an hour trying to see if this,
So you're in the back of the truck in the shooting area, waiting. It was hot, I bet.
Was it bedded or just feet?
It was bedded. Okay, bedded down. And after 15 minutes, I actually started to question. The lights starting to fade, and I started to question: is this really a couple tines on a rack? I thought, are those sticks? Because as the sun started to shift, the reflection started to change, and I really started to doubt myself, right? And I'm hunting with some Mexican guides, and they said no, that's definitely a deer. But at about 25 minutes, finally he picked his head up. He literally was had his head on the ground, and then he turned his head, and when he turned his head, I was like, oh my gosh,
that's a shooter.
That's a shooter. Yeah. So then the dilemma became, okay, I'm up against the sun setting in. It's going to be dark. And so I'm waiting for this deer to come up. Some does actually came through, and he didn't move. It was really super surprising.
Yeah.
He didn't get up.
A lot of times those bigger bucks, it's the last minute. It's just the last minute.
So
and they're up feeding early, and they're down fast.
So he never got up when the does came through. And then the lights fading, and I am now saying it's going to get dark, and I've got to make a decision. What am I going to do? So I ended up shooting this buck, the first shot, in its bed through the brush, guessing where his vitals were.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it worked out. And my only other option was to let this deer go and try to find him again. And you can imagine after 30 some odd days, I mean,
it wasn't appealing.
It wasn't appealing at all.
So, in a lot of places in the West, when we're hunting mule deer, you can leave a buck and come back the next morning, and they're there.
Right.
Is that the same down there, or are they gone?
It's so thick, probably. Chances.
Yeah, you might never see that deer again.
Yeah.
You might never see it again, and nobody might see it again.
Not like an open hillside in the Rocky Mountains where they're going to be hanging over on that ridge.
That's right. And in another scenario, if I were doing that hunt, say in Colorado or Idaho or Nevada, I would have probably just said, okay, we'll come back tomorrow and find him again.
So you take the shot. You're pretty confident.
Take the shot. I'm pretty confident. Nothing happens with the first shot, and I'm like, I'm expecting something to happen. So it's a real quick second shot.
You're ready for a second shot.
I made a second shot, and then he stood up, and I had a full view of his vitals, and I put another shot. But after inspecting the deer, all 3 were lethal shots. All 3 shots were. So then you get into the experience. The sun's about to set. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, and you walk up on this deer, and there's like, it just keeps getting bigger.
So there was no ground shrinkage.
There's no ground shrinkage. It's just like, oh my gosh. And then the mass, it's everything you want from Sonora, Mexico mule deer, So probably the most impressive thing about the deer down there, I think, is the mass. I mean, it's just.
And the width. I love the width on this big Sonoran deer.
Yeah, this specific buck is 32 inches outside.
Oh, wow.
And just massive.
And 29 inside, and 39 inches of mass. So that's what makes
Were your guides impressed?
Everybody was very happy, extremely happy. I can't say enough about these guys. So the guides are actually working ranch hands.
Uh-huh. And they know the deer. They know the habitat.
They know that the ranch. They know the habitat. When they're not, hunting's like a vacation time for them.
Yeah, I bet.
But otherwise, they're out actually working the cattle and the other aspects of the ranch and so on. So
year round, when they're on the ranch, they're seeing deer, and they know what deer are out there.
So how many deer do they take on a place? I mean, how big was the ranch out? Do they take a lot of deer? Do they get a lot of hunters? I know you said it was an outfitter, but is it similar to what we see in the States for southwestern or western mule deer hunting?
Well, they take, I want to say, I'm going to guess this, but it's like maybe if every single person tagged out, it would be 12 deer a year. Mm-hmm. Okay. But the opportunity to kill a muy grande versus like killing a 185-inch deer, there's the small bucks are like 180s, 185. Yeah.
Did you find it hard to pass up bucks that you normally would have shot?
Yeah. The first time I did, but you have to keep reminding yourself, you're not hunting in Utah or Idaho or wherever. I took a friend down this year to Mexico, his first time, and he passed up a deer the first day, and he got some photos of it, and he's haunted by it.
Keeps looking at it.
And this deer wasn't like he was probably like a 190 type deer, but his frame just laid out. He just had short tines. I mean, this deer was pushing like 35 inches.
Wow.
Right? And that's
big width over height. I love those big wide Sonoran.
Big wide heavy deer. But to your question, I mean, you're seeing these really really good bucks that back home you'd be thrilled to harvest.
I actually drew a really good Montana elk tag this year, and the first bulls we saw were a 350 and 400 class bull, and so I said, "There's the bar, guys." And I ended up not taking an animal after looking at at least 20 bulls that I would have killed in any other year, bow, rifle, you name it, and probably 60 bulls all together over the 23-day hunting period. And people ask me, do you I said, no, you don't kill a big bull or a big buck if you shoot the little ones.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that buck I told you guys about, that giant 231-inch deer. Well, the rest of the story on that is my good buddy Tony Caligiuri. He's the president of Boyd Harness Company.
I had dinner with him not long ago at the Boone and Crockett function.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So he's been hunting on this place for 16 years. 16 years he's been hunting in this specific Rancho Hunting's the name of it. Mario and Alejandro Camus, the operation. Mm-hmm. He had a slot last year for a high-level visibility celebrity, and that guy fell through. So he made a phone call to his insurance agent, and he said, "Hey, do you want to go to Sonora on a mule deer hunt?" And he's like, "You know what? That's really interesting." He goes, "I've never hunted mule deer. In fact, I've never seen a mule deer."
Oh, no.
Okay? All right. So keep in mind I've got all these days and all this time, right? So the insurance agent, gets his stuff, and he goes down. And long story short is that opening day, first day, not opening day, but first day, first light, this insurance agent has this buck materialize in front of him. And his Mexican guide's like, shoot, shoot. And he's like, are you serious?
Is that a big one?
It's only the first 4 minutes of the hunt. He's like, shoot, shoot. So he convinces him to shoot, and he ends up with this 231-inch mule deer.
Man.
First mule deer he'd ever seen live.
Wow.
That's incredible.
So you got one spectrum of like my quest, which is, let's say 3 trips, and you got another spectrum. A guy gets a last-minute invite and goes down and shoots an absolute monster, right?
Well, we hear those stories across the country, and I think that's what excites me continually about hunting is unless you're out there, you never know what you're going to find or have the opportunity. And people that stay at home because of the weather or the wind or they're just defeated mentally may miss out on that opportunity to have that buck come by.
Those ranches down there, I mean, you're not going to get people to pay good money to come down and shoot spikes and foghorn. So to get big antlers, you need age. You need to let them grow old. And with a real light harvest, like 12 on a huge ranch. And you need good genetics, and genetics are normally there in every gene pool. If you let them get old and you make sure they have good nutrition, you're going to have some big antlers in an older age class population. And that brush down there is all high in protein. And when they get rains in the spring and some summer rains, the monsoon rains down there and the summer rain, they produce that carpet of green forbs and herbaceous stuff. That's super high in energy and super high in nutrition for them. So they've got good protein to grow antlers, and they've got that good pulses of good energy throughout the year.
Have you ever looked at the skull plate on a Sonoran mule deer and seen that hump that's between the pedestals?
I've seen it on big mature deer.
Yeah.
But you think it's a Sonoran characteristic?
That's your Dr. Deer. I think it is, and it's.
I see a new chapter in your book coming.
Right,
it's very.
I haven't seen enough skulls to look at that kind of comparison to see whether that falls out.
It's really prominent. It's kind of like if you took a quarter of a baseball and cut the top of it, and it's right on top.
I've seen that on big skulls, but never associated with Sonoran skulls.
Well, I've wondered if that's a specific genetic trait to those Sonoran mule deer. There's all kinds of other interesting stuff too. This is something that you never see in the United States. When you harvest a deer, these cowboys, and they call them cowboys, they don't gut the deer for probably 2, maybe 3 days. They'll let that deer sit. Now, what do you do with the meat? You can bring it back. I can bring it back. We actually drove down from Tucson.
Right.
There's some challenges and stuff, but they make it into jerky. Everything gets turned into jerky. The entire deer gets turned into jerky.
They probably don't have the food storage capabilities that we have in the States with freezers.
Walk-in freezers, and I've questioned, like, hey, aren't we going to take care of that deer? And they're like, oh, no, it's good. And then the process is freaking fascinating. It's like what you would expect to see if you were, with the Native Americans. I mean, like Dances with Wolves type thing. Mm-hmm. These guys are jerking this entire deer. They hang the meat after it gets salted outside, and then that becomes what their main staple that
Carne
they eat.
Yeah, they'll shred it up and put it in the frying pan with a little bit of oil, tomatoes, and onions.
Now, a coos deer, though, that's premium for them.
Yeah.
They're gonna
eat that fresh.
Eat that like a steak, right? But the mule deer, they turn.
So it's almost like the aging debate with waterfowl and game birds.
Exactly.
Keeping the guts in.
Yeah, it's pretty.
That's great. So when I think of mule deer, I'm pretty schooled on this issue. I oftentimes don't think about Mexico, but if you go back and look, you look at the mountain ranges, you look at some of the work by Aldo Leopold and others, there are a lot of mule deer in Mexico. Jim, can you give us the range and, Butch, why did you choose that specific area?
Well, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, which is Tony Caligiuri and Boyd. And the group that is hunting there, they've had a long history with this place. And so it was kind of an introduction, through their experiences. Mexico has changed a whole bunch over the last, let's say, 10 years. Prior to me going down, there was all kinds of warnings from the State Department with travel, do not travel.
Yeah, because of cartels.
Yeah, exactly. The cartel is primarily the major thing. So the if you do go, you want to go with somebody that you have a lot of confidence in, and I had all the confidence in the world because of
they've been there so long.
And then you're also being, in this case, the owners come up and pick you up in Tucson and then bring you down through the border.
Okay, so they help you get through the customs
Yeah,
issues.
the first time I went, I flew into Hermosillo and then drove up. It's, in my opinion, it's easier if you can go Tucson and drive down just from the gun permitting and
so
all
you
the
were
aspects.
able to take your own firearms with you.
Yeah, you submit your paperwork, you get some documentation, and then it's kind of interesting. You blow through the security on the U.S. Nogales border, and then about, 30 minutes, 40 minutes in it, you come into a military checkpoint, and that's where you pull in, and everybody, you open up all your guns and gun cases and ammo, and they come out and they count your ammo, and they look at the serial numbers, and I didn't have any problems. I've heard some guys, if you're off like one number or something, you can be hung up there.
Yeah, I went through that when we went to South Africa, with the inspection, with your 4457 forms and all the other stuff, import fees, and but they were very, very clear about making sure your serial numbers match and that they can read your writing.
Well, that's why it's important to go with people that know what the deal is.
And, it goes back into this quest, this mental passion to go kill this giant Sonoran mule deer. My wife's, looking at the conditions, and she's like, "Are you crazy?" And, and I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I am a little bit, because I've, got this idea of maybe harvesting a giant Sonora mule deer." So, but it was overall super safe for us. That's always, I guess, would be the other consideration if you're thinking about going down to Mexico.
I've gone down and given talks on mule deer in Chihuahua and Chihuahua City at the request of some of the Mexican biologists and people, and we've had some of the same experiences, not bringing firearms through, but they've come pick me up at the border, and you stop at the checkpoint, and the 16-year-old has the MP5, and he's never been to hunter education, so he's swinging the barrel back and forth.
Yeah, right.
So, Jim, what's the range of mule deer in Mexico?
It goes down to Zacatecas. We always say that mule deer are in North America from A to Z, from Alaska, the blacktails, down to Zacatecas. So
we have mule deer in Fairbanks now.
In Fairbanks, that's right. They're expanding.
Yeah. So Zacatecas south.
So
southern
that's
Mexico.
south of Sonora. Yep, that's down there by Durango. So they get down to about Durango and Zacatecas. Down there.
Okay, I've always thought they were mountain, up high.
In the Southwest, right? In the Southwest, they're lowland, flat country. In the Rocky Mountain West, you've got whitetail along the riparian areas and in the valleys, and you have mule deer up in the mountains. And that completely reverses in the Southwest, where we have our little cows whitetail up in the mountains above 4,000 feet elevation, and the desert mule deer are down there in the flats and the mesquite grasslands and Sonoran Desert.
Do we still have some native pride? I think there's still jaguars down there. And,
absolutely.
Mountain lions and other
Arizona.
things. So it's actually a lot less developed. You probably didn't see the number of roads and.
Oh my gosh, it is like, let your imagination go. I mean, you are in the middle of nowhere. The one closest town's called Benjamin Hill.
Oh yeah.
And
I've been to the Camus Ranch. You talked about the Camus family, right? We were down there years ago with mass bobwhite stuff, and so Alejandro Camus had us at his place. So I'm familiar with that whole area. Benjamin Hill was the last place that native mass bobwhites were. So,
oh, really?
North of Hermosillo.
Did you know that there is a story that that ranch would build? This is, a couple hundreds of years ago. They would build these lookout towers and put dummies in the tower to ward off these Apache raids.
Never heard that story.
And the rest of the story is that the Camus, that they started to call this camouflage, and that the name originated from the Camus Ranch.
Really?
You have to ask Tony Caligiuri about it. He's the one that has got all the connections on it. But if that were true, it'd even be more fascinating.
That's pretty
Did they ask you about your camouflage you were wearing? Did you take some desert stuff down?
So the Camus family and all the ranchers down there love Kryptek. They absolutely love it. So they all wear it, and they're huge fans of our camo.
Yeah, the Kryptek water bottle I've got here on the table, I didn't bring just for you. It goes everywhere.
Really?
Yeah, our life member jackets now are Kryptek jackets. And
I know.
You've been a great partner. The story you told us last year, how you developed that. I mean, that's still one of our higher listened to episodes.
I love that one.
I tell folks about that all the time, and I say, which is great. Their stuff is quality, and it sounds like it's ever evolving. What's new on the horizon for Kryptek? Are you excited about anything for 2020 and beyond?
Well, I am excited about one specific program. It could be used in hunting early season, but it's our combat collection. We designed it specifically in collaboration with U.S. Spec Ops, and there's an enormous amount of traction and lift with foreign militaries and specifically counter-terrorist organizations. So that's new. There's a lot of guys that are looking at that for early season bow hunting, and also specifically back in these areas like in Arizona where you want to have some durability to your apparel, so the stickers and stuff just aren't shredding your gear. So we also have several new pieces that we've brought in for our altitude collection, which is our super high end hunting collection, and so that's cool. And there's production with several different new things that are underway. They're going to be launched this fall. But the stuff that's new right now, like in our booth, that's on the shelf and ready to go, is several new pieces in the altitude collection, layering pieces and fleeces and so on. So we're always adding and improving. And back to the point with involvement with Mule Deer Foundation, I absolutely love mule deer hunting. I think I've said this before. If somebody held a gun to my head and said you could only hunt one species for the rest of your life, it would be mule deer. And it all goes back into the culture of how I grew up, hunting mule deer. And so, I love what the Mule Deer Foundation's doing and ensuring that, we're going to be able to hunt mule deer for generations and generations to come. We're getting ready to drop a video. We got permission from Idaho Wild Fish and Game to film an event that we've been involved with ever since I moved back to Idaho, I think in 2013, but it's a fawn capturing that we do, and it usually happens the first week in January. So we filmed that this year, and we're putting some effort into conservation itself with our time and energy, and not just trying to wave our hands. So
that's awesome when industry gets involved in conservation and contributes in that way too.
Well, we have a conservation booth here for the first time, and it's getting a lot of attention. And I've said this, I get criticized for it because people say you shouldn't criticize things you don't do well, but we don't tell our story well enough.
It's true.
We do so much. Jim and I have worked together for a long time. He's the chair of the Mule Deer Working Group. In Idaho, we've planted almost 500,000 plants on 30,000+ acres and burned winter range. We're getting ready to step up our game in Idaho on some migration corridor stuff. And so it's exciting times. And, when we fall back on, we look at corporate folks like yourself wanting to be involved in the conservation, that really just reconfirms what we already know. People are in this for conservation.
Right.
They want to support groups doing the right thing. And, we're just real happy that you're part of the MDF family. And because when we turn to folks like Jim, they're the folks that tell us what we should be doing out there.
Right.
Yeah, it's a partnership. Definitely a partnership, and we can do so much together.
Well, Butch, we've taken up enough of your time today. Thank you so much for coming back and telling us that story. Are you going back to Mexico this year, or are you on a new quest?
I not this year. I will probably go back next year. But hopefully I can shoot some more Mexican Sonoran mule deer. I'll be pretty picky.
Yeah, the bar's set,
Yeah.
That's pretty tough.
Yeah. So, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Jim, as always, thank you for joining us, bringing your wealth of knowledge. And until next time, I'm Steve Belinda, and thank you for Talking Mule Deer.
Thanks for Talking Mule Deer with Steve Belinda and Jody Stemler. The Mule Deer Foundation is the only conservation group in North America dedicated to restoring, improving, and protecting mule deer and black-tailed deer and their habitat. MDF is a strong voice for hunters in access, wildlife management, and conservation policy issues. To find out more, visit www.muledeer.org and stay tuned for the next episode of Talkin' Mule Deer.